When the Queen's minister gives his word on her behalf, it should be axiomatic that he will keep it, even if the consequences are unpalatable. Genuinely noble words, if a touch sexist, from former Attorney General Geoffrey Cox, who, despite being an ardent Brexiteer, is threatening to vote against Boris's UK internal market bill today on moral grounds. It seems odd for a barrister, so used to dealing in the multiplicity of shades of grey offered by interpretations of British law, that this seems to be a moral absolute. It's a tricky backpedal on the withdrawal agreement, I grant you, but it does beg the question, should a government stick to its guns even when it knows the consequences are wrong? Jeff uses the term unpalatable, but what Michelle Barnier has sinisterly hinted here, it is a food blockade of Northern Ireland. Last time that was threatened it was by a German bloke with a funny little moustache. As any philosophy undergraduate will tell you, there are few moral absolutes. Take the old chestnut, if you could have put a bullet through Hitler's brain in 1939, should you have done? Most models of classical ethics would say no. Most sane human beings would say yes. And, sticking with the Adolf theme, in 1939 Neville Chamberlain basically promised Hitler Britain would not attack Germany. Wonder how well keeping that promise would have worked out. Remember that bit though, I'm coming back to it. Mr. Cox, writing in today's Times, goes on to say, it is unconscionable that this country, justly famous for its regard for the rule of law around the world, should act in such a way. But here's the thing. Back in 1939 Britain quickly changed tack because Adolf Hitler broke his word. He clearly had no intention of sticking to anything he told Chamberlain. And no, I'm not really comparing Mr. Barnier to Hitler, though if I ever make it to the Hampstead dinner party set, the pair's identical lust for European unification, run from a central power base by a tiny cabal of people with an ideologically uncompromising worldview, might make for a lively conversation over the after eights. But I am suggesting that Mr. Barnier has broken his word. He's weaponizing Northern Ireland, which is something he promised he would never do. Even Mr. Cox concedes duty of good faith is a two-way street. The EU faces a precisely equal obligation, and if, as reported, it has sought to use Northern Ireland as a lever in the trade negotiations, for example by suggesting that it might decline to extend to our farmers the same recognition for the purposes of imports of animal products that it has in place with Africa and Central Asia, thus marooning Northern Ireland from its main market in Great Britain, then its behavior is open to very severe criticism. It's lawyer speech for suggesting Mr. Barnier has said one thing and done another. At the end of the day it will boil down to whether you are a Brexit purist or a Brexit pragmatist. Is anyone still a Remainer? There is no question that Barnier's demands that the UK commit itself to aligning with Brussels safety rules before it gets on the EU product safety list is absolutely the EU telling Britain what to do, in perpetuity. It's everything we hoped Brexit would get rid of. If Britain doesn't make the list, then, crazy as it seems, in law British food would be banned from being sent to Northern Ireland, which is the crux of the current problem. And the telling thing is, as Lord Frost pointed out yesterday, Mr. Barnier knows he's messing with us, because Britain is already committed to operating EU rules. Did you get that? The thing he is getting in such a hissy fit about demanding we do, we are already doing. Although he doesn't like our opt-out clause, described fairly and precisely by Lord Frost thus, any changes in future would be notified to the WTO, World Trade Organization, and the EU in the usual way with plenty of lead time. Sounds pretty fair to me. Again, even Mr. Cox, admittedly in slightly opaque, lawyerly speech, seems to accept there are circumstances, which we may be close to, which would allow for the suspension of the withdrawal agreement as per Boris's bill, and they are already written into the withdrawal agreement. Admittedly these are supposed to be temporary measures to allow a period of arbitration, but they still suggest that, in spite of the lofty rhetoric, Mr. Cox and Mr. Johnson may not be quite such poles apart after all. When push comes to shove, we shouldn't sacrifice the genuine needs of Brexit and the genuine needs of Northern Ireland on the altar of what is essentially virtue signaling.